Thank you for tuning in to the Okinawa Karate Podcast. As always, I am Josh Simmers, coming to you from the birthplace of karate, Okinawa, Japan. This beautiful view that you see here was recorded on April 7th, 2021 at Taguchi Beach in Yomitan. This beach has great historical importance to the island and its people. The video series that you're about to watch might look a little different than my normal videos that focus solely on karate. This video series will focus on the Ryukyu history and the World War II history that brings us to the Okinawa of today. I'm going to be joined by my good friend and a man that I'm very happy to call Sensei, Mr. Jason Perry. Perry Sensei and I hope you enjoy this series and hope you walk away knowing more about the history of this tiny island and maybe also wanting to learn a little more on your next visit. Sometimes it's better to get out of the dojo and see the island from a different perspective. Please enjoy this video series.
So this is a pretty special place on April 1st, 1945. This is the location where U.S. forces landed in the last invasion of Japanese territory before the end of the war. And of course we're here in Okinawa. Just over my left shoulder is Tsunabe, and you see you've got the river running right behind me. The landing beaches, which are generally concave, running all the way up to the north and somewhat down toward the south. These beaches, as well as another set of beaches on the other side of the island, were considered by the amphibious force for landing. Ultimately, this beach, Taguchi Beach, was chosen for the landing. And so out here on that morning, which happened to be Easter morning, we just celebrated Easter ourselves here in Okinawa, the seas and the weather had been really bad leading up to that day. And on Easter Day in 1945, the ocean was like glass. And so they got up that morning and the invasion was on. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, tactically, you have forces land to the south. We're generally facing south right now. You have forces landing to the south. You have forces landing to the north. Here on the island is a fairly narrow, we're in the town of Yomitan, and it's a fairly narrow part of the island where you could cut the island in half. So tactically, the Marines generally attacked on the north flank, cut the island in half. The Army landed on the south and turned right and headed south. Their primary objectives were Yomitan Auxiliary Airfield, which is actually right over there, and what is today Tori Station, some of you might know. And then, of course, the other airfields being very important to both the Japanese and to the Americans. You have Kadena, and further down south you have Futenma Airfield, and so those became the initial objectives on that morning. Hundreds of ships with tens of thousands of landing forces came ashore here and began the operation. Well, if you want to know where we are, just now we're standing right here, and you could see the river behind me. This is that river. This is north, and here this is south. This area here is called Yomitan Village. This is Onna Village, and this is Chatan. The area here is called Tsunabe, and you can see the landing beaches were fairly long, and there had been several operations to prepare for this invasion, but that's generally how the initial stages of the amphibious assault played out. It was unopposed, and so as the Marines and soldiers and sailors came ashore, they anticipated heavy fighting as they had experienced only recently in places like Iwo Jima and Guam and Peleliu and Tarawa and the Philippines and some places where the fighting was significant. Here they did not experience resistance initially. General Ushijima, the leader of the commanding general of the Japanese forces here, had decided to consolidate his defenses up at Hacksaw Ridge, Maeda Ridge, which we call Hacksaw Ridge, and then Shuri Ridge, which is where Shuri Castle is. And so a lot of the heavy fighting happened several days into the amphibious assault. So this is one of the memorials set up by the Okinawa Prefecture Yomitan village, and it talks about what happened here in 1945. It says that the battle was called the Typhoon of Steel. Not a single tree or a blade of grass remained. The people had never experienced such a war or battle in the past, one that would change the culture and the peace of the people, and cost the lives of many of the people here. Of course, it goes on to say that that of course the local citizens here, many of them were pulled into the battle. But this is a memorial in basically offering the prayers and hopes, established to offer the prayers and hopes that these beaches will never be used by military forces again for such a terrible thing. So this is a photo from the landing, what it looked like then, and this is essentially U.S. forces that had landed. This would have been follow-on echelons of waves of forces coming ashore that were part of the buildup of the logistics that would support the follow-on operations down south and then further north toward Motobu, and of course along the Hijagawa river here. So you can see the river behind us, and this is actually a photo of the river.
And we've got
there's the village announcements about the coronavirus and preventing the spread of coronavirus. So
now,
yeah,
this is actually supposed to be this location where we're at.
Well, I think it's down. I think it's down on the beaches. It would be, down on the beaches, and I don't know exactly the spot where that hill, for example, is. If that's been flattened or if it's that hill there, because a lot of this stuff, of course, is kind of reclaimed. I think since the war, so it's hard to recreate the exact time. Now, this I think is probably untouched over here behind us, the Toguchi Beach part.
Toguchi side, yeah, this is definitely a reclaimed. And
right.
Didn't look like that in 1945.
Yeah. So you could see that. I mean, if you were to venture a guess, it could even be
right
like
there.
That hill right there,
Yep.
Right? It's a guess. I don't know that for a fact. But.
This is the karate portion of what we're doing here. It's not only about the military history, but that is very important. But Perry Sensei pulled out a nice book that many people are going to be familiar with, and we're going to learn a little bit about the significance of this river and one of the more well-known karate masters.
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody knows. So we're in Chatan, and of course Kyan Chotoku.
We're in Yomitan.
I'm sorry, Yomitan. Did I just say Chatan?
Yeah, we're in Yomitan.
Thank you. We're in Yomitan. Chatan is right over there, but Kyan Chotoku, of course, his memorial is here, and many of you if you've been to Okinawa, you've probably you can go and see the memorial that Okinawa has set up for Kyan Chotoku Sensei. But there's a story here by Nagamine Shoshin Sensei, and I'm reading this. This is thanks to Patrick McCarthy's translation about when Kyan Sensei moved to Yomitan, and he moved to just behind us up here in a place called Makihara. And so this is the Hijagawa is this river that we're looking at. And the story goes, let me see if I can find it here, that one story maintained that in his youth, we're talking about Kyan Chotoku Sensei, that he once jumped off one end of the Hijabashi Bridge. So after he jumped off one end of the Hijabashi Bridge and then leaped back up the other side like a bird in flight. However, when Kyan learned from him, his strength had declined considerably and he needed a stick to to walk about. So this was a story about Arakaki Ankichi, who taught Kyan Sensei here at Hijabashi Bridge, and Arakaki Ankichi, known for his physical abilities, and but by the time Kyan Sensei had moved here, of course he didn't have those same physical abilities, but that was the story. And that would have happened just right here behind us. It's kind of cool to think about.
I bet you if we look up, and when we dig into finding pictures of the landing, right, back in 45, we'll probably find that bridge.
We very well might.
Because he passed away right after the war.
Well, that's the thing
during
about
the war.
That's the thing about the karate stuff, is that, you know, karate having been really established. I mean, 1936 really is where we kind of solidify what modern karate would become, and so the early 1900s, and a real transformative time of karate from traditional Okinawa te or todi to what we know as modern traditional karate. And the war really kind of interrupted, in a way, what was progressing, I think, as this new martial art that had been introduced to the Okinawan Japanese school systems. Of course, Gichin Funakoshi by now has gone up to Tokyo.
Yep.
Karate is taking off at the Kodokan. The Imperial Prince had come down here and had a karate demonstration, and karate starting, and then this battle happened.
And then this battle happened. Yeah. And unfortunately, we lost a lot.
And we lost a lot of those formative forefathers of modern Okinawan karate. And so then coming out of the battle, of course, you have a lot of the U.S. forces who are part of the occupation. This island becomes a part of U.S. administration until 1972. But and so many of the students of those early masters who maybe didn't survive the war, they began to see the opportunity to teach interested GIs, Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, karate. And so, you know, when we look at the history, it's a pretty pivotal time.
Yeah, it is. There's going to be more to come for that. This is just the beginning, so I really appreciate you coming out here on a beautiful
day. It's been a little windy here, but it really kind of
April 7th, gorgeous day out here in Taguchi Beach. We're going to do some more. Unfortunately, the lighting is getting a little dim for us right now, and according to our watch, we have about 5 more minutes until sunset. So
we might have to go watch the sun drop.
We're going to have to go watch the sunset and do a little recording at another time. So this is how we start our day. Okay, look. I am deathly afraid of snakes. I mean, I'm walking on my tippy toes right now as if that's gonna matter, right? Oh my gosh. Deathly afraid of snakes. And I wasn't smart enough to wear long pants.
This is much more grown over than the last time I was
here. Yeah, well. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're fine. Just right.
We're fine, he says.
Yeah.
So Perry Sensei is leading the way. We didn't bring a bow or a kama. You know, two karateka that didn't think ahead with that, right?
I haven't said a kama.
Oh, he's got a kama in the car.
Yeah,
So we're using my tripod as a weapon here. We're trying to clear the pathway. Oh man, I'm running back out of there, I'm telling you right now. So we are on an adventure today to check out a couple different sites as part of this tour. We've been to Yomitan, and we've talked about, you know, what took place on April 1st, 1945. See, this is where the Habu hang out, by the sign.
Because there's a sign that says Habu hang out right
It's
here.
like deer crossing back in the States, right? They only cross with those signs. But so I'm going to put the camera away because it's going to get a little slick, and I got to navigate down here perhaps with two hands ready to grab something. But we're going down, obviously, in the jungle here. to explore and to pay respects at what is called the Happy Cave. And then after this, we're going to make a trip not far from here to what is called the Sad Cave, and Perry Sensei will give us an explanation on the history behind those two caves.
So this is called Shimokugama Cave. In English we call it Happy Cave. But this is on April, see this guy? That's a big spider.
Oh my God. We just walked by that twice.
Yeah, there's my hand. Yeah, orb spider, banana spider.
I can't remember which ones are venomous, which ones are.
I don't think theirs are venomous, but they're big. They're big, and I still don't want to mess with it.
So this is what we had to traverse to get down here, and like I said, I'm scared to death of it. And there's one right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a little one. There's one right behind you as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That one might be.
They're small right now. They'll get a lot bigger here. This one's a pretty good size one for as early as it is. There's one. There's one.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yes, Shimokugama. In English, we often call this the Happy Cave. The reason is because on April 1st, 1945, there were about 1,000 civilians, Okinawan civilians, residents here. This area is called Ihei, and we're right near Yomitan, right outside, just inland of the landing beaches. And so on the day of the U.S. forces landed, just up the way here, they came upon this cave with 1,000 people, and of course they didn't know there were 1,000 people and didn't know what the intentions of those people were. The people inside the cave, the Okinawans inside the cave, of course, had been told that the Americans would kill them, rape them, and do terrible things to the locals, and so they were extremely hesitant, of course. Many of them were also convinced that the best way to avoid those things would be to kill themselves. In this cave, though, there were two brothers, the Higa brothers. And the Higas had lived in Hawaii prior to the war. And despite the leaflets that told the Okinawans of the terrible things that would happen, despite those messages that they were receiving, the Higa brothers were not convinced that the Americans would do those things, having experienced it, and of course being able to speak English. And so I can just imagine, if it was me, I'd have put a machine gun just right up there, oriented on the mouth of the cave here for security. So walking out of this cave would have been quite a scary thing to do. But the Higa brothers stepped out of the cave and made contact with the American forces here, and ultimately that led to those 1,000 individuals being taken by the U.S. forces and placed in a safe location, and they survived the war. The tunnel in here, and we just went down this tunnel a little ways, about 150 meters or so. The tunnel here is about 2.5 kilometers, and on the other side, and it's collapsed since, but on the other side of this is another cave that we're going to go to next, and in English we call that the Sad Cave, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
All right, so we walked, what do you think? We walked 200, 100 meters, 150? Maybe 100, 150 meters back in here. And we're going to go ahead and turn the flashlights off for a moment. And that's it. I mean, it is, I'm moving the camera, but it is just complete pitch black in here. So, pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And remember, this is the Happy Cave. I mean, there was all the people in here. The story goes that they survived. They hung out in here, and they survived. So we're trying to remember that as we climb through.
So this is called the Chibichirigama cave. Gama means cave, so that's a little redundant. But just over this hill, we're in a little bit of a kind of a bowl here, but just over this hill is are the landing beaches, and you can see them. We're very close to where the initial landings occurred. But as that was happening, approximately 140 people came to this cave, which is connected to the Shimuku cave, Shimuku-gama, that we were just at. The two caves are connected, actually, were connected. They're not anymore because of a cave-in that happened at some point. But at this location, on April 1st, 1945, there were approximately 140 people from this same area who took refuge here in this cave. Unfortunately, they did not have a Higa brother with them or somebody like that, and so they were left to their own devices to figure out what best to do. Of the 140 or so people who took refuge here, 83 of them decided that it would be best to commit what's called Shudan Jiketsu, which means basically a group suicide, which was a way to end your life in a way that wouldn't leave a stain on your name, or and to give your life for the emperor, for your country, and this would of course have been in Imperial Japan. So that's what they decided to do. I also understand that 2 individuals lost their lives at the hands of U.S. forces here, I'm sure, as they were approaching and securing the tunnel, and as events unfolded here. Of the 83 individuals who committed suicide here, about 60% were children. And so the facts about what happened here weren't actually known until about 38 years after the war, according to this. And so when those facts came to light, the people of this area put together this memorial, this monument, to remember those events. And this memorial is essentially the families that were left here, those still living. It's their prayer for peace. And then over on this side are those who lost their lives at Chibichirigama on that day. They're organized by family, so you have family names, and then you have the individuals here and their ages here. And so you can see they're all, but a lot of children, 42, 49-year-old, 9 and a 4-year-old. So really is, when you think about it, Sad Cave it's an appropriate name. So this is the entrance to the cave here, and you can see the colorful streamers coming down. Those are senbazuru. Sen means 1,000, tsuru means cranes, and so they are orizuru, or origami, folded cranes. And in a lot of places in Japan, if you go to Hiroshima or Nagasaki or down to the Peace Prayer Park, you'll often see these 1,000 cranes. When people get sick, often people will fold 1,000 cranes, and you stack them on top of each other on a string, and they make these long streamers. And maybe we can get in there and take a look at that. The crane, it's thought that the crane lives for 1,000 years. It's thought that someone who folds 1,000 cranes, the gods will grant its wishes, and so often you'll see the 1,000 cranes used at memorials or for people who are ill and things like that throughout Japan. So you can see here that there are a number of these that have been brought down and placed in this location to, again, probably as they have read the prayer for peace over here just to our right. So this is the entrance to the cave.
All right, so Perry Sensei and I just visited the Happy Cave, and then right below us here, these are the steps that lead down to what we refer to as the Sad Cave. So when I was telling my wife where we're going today, you know, we've talked about this off camera too, right? The look that you get
Right.
from
Really?
Okinawans,
Right.
or wives in general, right? But kind of the breathing through the teeth,
Sucking air through the teeth.
and like this look to the side, like, what's wrong with you type deal, kind of. So my wife gave me that look, and she said, you're taking salt with you, because I have to admit, I don't know the whole tradition behind this or the meaning behind this, but salt is for purification, right? If you attend a funeral here in Okinawa or in Japan, the family, after you attend the funeral, it's customary for the family to give you a small gift, a hand towel or something, just a small gesture of thank you. But in with this gift is typically a little note and then a packet of salt. Reminds me of like when you eat at a diner in America, they've got the little Dixie salt,
that's right.
salt pack or sugar packets, or salt
packets.
but that's what it is. So before you go in your home, you're supposed to cleanse yourself, and I brought this Ziploc baggie of salt. It's not anything else. So to keep my wife from preventing me to come in the home,
Bringing evil spirits into your home.
To bring, exactly, you don't want to bring the evil spirits into your home. Not that there's necessarily evil spirits at a location like this, but it's just this
fortune. It's luck. It's fortune. Right. It's anything that would suggest bad fortune.
Yep.
Casting that out.
Exactly. Keep it here, not in your home. So you're not my wife.
But we're gonna throw some salt together.
But if we were at home,
if
we were here, she would take this. Can I throw salt at you?
Sure.
So this is what we would do if we were coming home. My wife would throw that salt at me, even in my hair, not in my eyes. But so then you have to do the same to me.
Okay.
She's done this to me several times after funerals.
There you go.
And that's it. So we wanted to show you that. I'm probably butchering this. I want to say that even though we're not Buddhist, my family and I are not. We don't practice Buddhism, but funerals in Japan, funerals in Okinawa, follow the Buddhist tradition. Buddhism tradition.
Right. Death is a Buddhist tradition. So marriage would be a Shinto
tradition. Yeah. So there's the Shintoism, then the Buddhism. A lot of times the shrines are right next to each other in Japan. So at a funeral, when you are honoring death or celebrating, I guess, the person's life, that's the tradition that you follow, is the Buddhist tradition. And that, I believe, is where this comes from with the salt. And we just wanted to show that to you. I had to do it. I promised my wife I would do it, so we figured we'd throw it on camera.
But if you see like sumo wrestling, they throw salt into the dohyo, right? Before every match, they throw salt into the dohyo. That casts out any spirits that should, it's a purification ritual, shiomaki, right? If you go to stores in Japan, often there'll be a little bowl of salt on out front of the. So salt's a very important, not unlike in Christianity, where salt is considered a preserver. Salt is in many cultures a very important role.
We don't have it anymore unless my wife moved it, but we used to have a small bowl right when you walk into our home. And that was custom. I remember when my mother-in-law was still alive, the same thing at their house. When you walked into the house, into the entryway, there was just a little bowl of salt there.
And they'd probably make it into a little cone.
It was a cone.
Yeah, it was a very nicely formed cone of salt, and that's what that's for.
That's what it's for. So a little more tidbit of history.
Yeah. All right.
We're going to pack up and we're going to head to a southern part of the island. Not exactly sure where we're going yet, but Perry Sensei's got a full day lined up for us.
All right. We are now at what's called Maeda Kochi. Many of you will know this as Hacksaw Ridge. We are in Urasoe, which is just the next city north of Naha. This really is a crossroads of a lot of Okinawan history that happened here, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we wander around. But behind me is the grave of a gentleman who was born in 1876. Okinawa was a Han of Japan at the time, not a prefecture. It didn't become a prefecture until 1879. And Iha-san was born here, went to school in Shuri, which is not far, just down that way. And he left school here in Okinawa and eventually makes his way to Tokyo, where he studied rhetoric, literature in Tokyo Daigaku at Tokyo University. He did a lot of research on Urasoe Castle, which is this location is where Urasoe Castle was. And he was one of the first researchers who developed the theory that Urasoe had been the main principality of Chuzan prior to the political power moving over to Shuri Castle. He also did a lot of research on what's called the Ryukyu Shogun. Ryukyu Shogun was basically in 1609 when the Satsuma Shimazu clan of Kyushu, Japan, with permission of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the shogun, came down to and invaded Okinawa and ultimately became, you call it a protectorate, an overlord of Ryukyu. Dissolved the Ryukyu kingdom as it was known prior to that time, and that's called the Ryukyu Shogun. And from there, of course, the Okinawans experienced discrimination and because they weren't Japanese. They didn't speak Japanese, they didn't look Japanese, and yet now they were expected to be a part of Japan. So he did a lot of work to restore kind of the pride of the Ryukyuans through his study of history. And he's interned here at Urasoe Castle because of all of the research he did on that era. Hey, this we've got quite the photographic system set up here. Might be a little difficult to see, but this is representative. This is one of the caves inside Hacksaw Ridge or Maeda Kochi, and it's, of course, there's a whole system of caves that run from one side of the ridge. The side over this way is where the Americans attacked from, and on our left here, this is where Shuri Castle is, and these caves all interconnected. But this is representative of, this a man-made cave. This would have been dug in the months prior to the battle, and it goes back. It's quite a maze of tunnels back here, with little ante rooms where, who knows, eating, sleeping, in medical activities occurred, ammunition storage. Who knows? I'm guessing, but those are the things that I can think through. But just wanted to show you what one of these caves might have looked like and see what the living conditions might have been. This would have been brutal to be in here during the typhoon of steel and the subsequent battle as forces came up, throwing satchel charges into the cave entrances. Of course, we had flamethrowers at the time, and one by one, hole by hole, going through and clearing these caves. And to be a defender in these caves would have been really a very difficult undertaking. So I think this is kind of a neat spot. What's right behind us, this is what we would call Hacksaw Ridge, Maeda Kochi, but you can see that's the old Urasoe Castle. This place was central in history from both the 1609, well, prior to 1609, from when it was built in the 13th century and became the major principality, the major political center of the Chuzan until that political power transitioned to Shuri. Shuri is right behind us, and I think we'll maybe get a shot, but Shuri's the next terrain feature over, the next high terrain feature over. What's interesting about this place is how much history occurred here. In 1609, the Satsuma clan, well, let me back up. As early as the late 1500s, the Shuri kingdom had established Shuri as the center of political power of Okinawa. Of course, the Ryukyu kingdom now had been unified, and King Shone is in power at Shuri Castle. Prior to that, this had been the political center. In 1609, shortly after the road that we're standing on right now was built, the Satsuma Shimazu clan attacked Okinawa. They actually landed at Toguchi Beach, which is where, well, they initially landed at Nakijin up on the Motobu Peninsula, and after defeating the Nakijin Gusku, they made their way via ship down to the Yomitan area and landed at the very same location that the U.S. forces did in 1945. From there, the Shimazu split their forces. They sent one force by land to head south toward Shuri, which is right in front of me over this way. But they had to get through Urasoe Castle first, and so there was a major battle that occurred here between the Ryukyu kingdom, and the Shimazu clan of samurai from Kyushu, Japan. Once Urasoe Castle fell, kind of the end was solidified for Shuri, which would be next. The other thing is, right over on this side is Naha Port. From Toguchi or Yomitan area, the Shimazu in 1609 brought their ships down and tried to enter Naha. Naha was defended by cannons from China, similar to what had been developed in China. The entrance to the port was protected by obstacles, specifically a chain running through the water that prevented unwanted ships from entering Naha. And also, the kingdom's forces were heavily defending the Naha area. Well, initially the Shimazu were repelled from entering Naha port, so they relocated from Naha, and they turned and they came just a little ways north to what's called Makiminato or Machinato, and there they landed. But in the meantime, with all those forces, Okinawan Ryukyu forces centered on Naha, the land army that had marched from Yomitan and defeated Urasoe Castle, they then made their way on foot down to Shuri, where the final battle of the 1609 Satsuma invasion would occur. Ultimately, King Shonei was defeated. He was taken back to the mainland, introduced to the Tokugawa shogun as kind of the spoils of the Japanese expedition down here to the Ryukyu Islands. Of course, in 1945, this place becomes central. It's the second ridge in a series of ridges from Kakazu to Maeda or Hacksaw, and then back to Shuri Ridge. This is where General Ushijima's main defenses were, and this would have been one of the sites of the primary battles of that war, and most of you know it as Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond Doss, of course, a conscientious objector who was an Army medic, fought right here and saved the lives of many of his fellow service members by lowering down ropes and lowering the injured down via rope down to the awaiting forces below. And of course, many of you know the rest of the story. So this is an interesting place. There's a lot of history that occurs here. The road we're standing on is called Ishidatami. It was built by King Shonei to connect Urasoe Castle to Shuri Castle, or Shuri Castle to Urasoe Castle. And through excavations, they've learned where that original road was, and this is part of that that path. And that would have been in the late 1500s, 1597 time frame, I believe, when they would have built this road from Urasoe Castle, connecting it to Shuri Castle. You gonna take your ear things out? Are you good? Okay.
Sounds much better when I take them out. So, Perry Sensei and I, we were previously up in Yomitan, right? Saw the Happy Cave, right. Visited the Sad Cave, and then we headed down here to Urasoe, which is probably most well known for a lot of people because of Hacksaw Ridge, right. A movie that came out just a few years ago, became quite popular. We're literally standing...
We're on top of it right now.
Yeah, maybe 100 meters from the supposed spot that Desmond Doss performed many of his heroics. Getting attacked here by
friends here.
Some kind of a neon green bug. That's kind of cool. Yeah. I don't know. Huh. I don't even know what that is, but it's not a habu, so I think I'm okay. I would have been pretty scared about the habu this morning, but we've had quite the adventure here today. This has been a great spot. Perry Sensei is going to give us a history lesson about why it's so significant in the Ryukyu history. He can do that a lot better than I can, and then probably wrap it up with something very significant that we just got to see by pure luck. I mean, being here at the right time of day. So take us through. We've seen probably 3 or 4 different sites right here that we wanted to share with you. Hopefully the audio comes out okay. It's extremely windy on the top when we were recording, so we decided to set up here and just do a quick rundown of what we just saw, and hopefully the wind noise is minimal right now. It's very windy on top of Hacksaw Ridge. So what did we see, sir?
Yeah, boy, where to start? I told Josh as we rolled up here, I said, for me, this is one of the places where you can come where there's so many cross sections of Okinawan history that it's just a fascinating place. You can spend forever here, and I'll try not to geek out too much on that. Wow. But
pretty remarkable.
Just right over here, just off the camera, running along this way is what we call Hacksaw Ridge, Maeda Kochi. We know it because of the events that happened in 1945. But the significance of this location dates way back to the 13th century when it was built, when the castle, Urasoe Castle, was built here. And Urasoe Castle really became, during the Gusku period of Okinawa, or the castle period of Okinawa, this became one of the predominant political centers of Okinawa, of Chuzan, or the middle king, or the middle mountain, literally is what that means, Chuzan. Eventually, the capital was relocated to Shuri, and Shuri, having defeated Hokuzan at Nakijin Castle and Nanzan, just down south of here, unified Okinawa and established what is now known as the Ryukyu Kingdom. So you go from the Gusku Kingdom, or the Three Periods Kingdom, and then the Ryukyu Kingdom era. And that lasts really until 1609. And just before the end of the century, the 16th century, so 1597 time frame, now the capital's over at Shuri. The castle, Urasoe, is still a castle. It's still a prominent castle. It's just not where the king resides. And we saw the old tatami stone
which
road.
Was really interesting to me. I didn't know that road was there.
Right.
Last time I walked right by it.
Yes.
And did not look down, but a stone road that led to Shuri from
That's
here,
right.
which was remarkable. And then you had explained it was kind of easy for the Satsuma to just walk down the road.
I
right?
guess I don't know. I'm guessing, but I would assume there was a road that led right to Shuri.
Yeah.
So the Satsuma in 1609 attack. They first came to Korijima and Yagajijima up in Motobu, anchored there, came ashore, and attacked Nakijin Gusku. And after a sharp fight there, they defeated the Naki Gusku castle there. They then got back on their ships and floated down to Yomitan. Well, Yomitan's where we were, of course, where the Americans landed later in 1945. So you can see it's a small island. There's only so much land, and so all these pieces of history start to overlap. From Yomitan, the Satsuma split their forces, left a land force ashore to make a foot movement south until they eventually ended up here at Urasoe. And in the meantime, the force that remained ashore, on the ships, they floated down just kind of over to our right-hand side here, as we're facing, to Naha. And so you had a two-pronged attack now. Ultimately, the land army of the Satsuma, or the Shimazu family, defeats Urasoe Castle here, and then they begin making their way further south and eventually find themselves at Shuri. Shuri is relatively lightly defended at the time because of the Shimazu shipborne force, the afloat force that made an attempt to come into Naha port. They were repelled or turned away at Naha port because of the defenses there. It was well defended. And they later made their way onto shore at Makiminato. Because the Ryukyu kingdom had so heavily defended Naha, they really didn't have as much defenses in Shuri to defend against the force that was marching from this location to Shuri. And ultimately that force ends up defeating King Shone. King Shone is taken hostage, essentially. He's taken back to the mainland. He's paraded in front of the Tokugawa shogunate, and ultimately the Okinawa falls under the oversight of the Satsuma warlord, if you will, in representing the Tokugawa shogunate. At that point, we're in the Tokugawa era of Japan.
So what was interesting to me with all this is I knew about the invasion, the Satsuma invasion, but I didn't realize how when the United States military came ashore in 1945, I didn't realize how much our movements mirrored what they did.
Small island,
right? It's a small island.
There's only so many places to land.
Yomitan down, and
that's right.
It's a very overcast day. When we were up on the ridge and it was just crazy windy, I tried to pan, and I'm going to try to show. We could see Yomitan in the distance. So when you're up here on the ridge, you can definitely see. And what's the book that you were telling me about?
The Battle for Okinawa.
Battle for Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right. So in 1945, this very spot was also heavily defended. This was the second line of a series of defenses in depth established by the Imperial Japanese Army. And so the operations officer of the army defending this island is a guy named Yahara. And Yahara talks about standing on this high ground, looking down at the undefended beaches of Yomitan, and he describes the American forces who were fully expecting a defense of the shoreline, who were fully expecting banzai attacks, which they had experienced multiple times in the island hopping campaign bringing us to Okinawa, and that never happened. The beaches were completely unsecure. The Americans came ashore undefended, unopposed, and made their way very rapidly all the way to Kadena, one of the major air nodes of Okinawa Island. So by mid-April, as the next ridge over is Kakazu, this, and then subsequently Maerekochi, where we are, Hacksaw Ridge, heavily defended. Tunnel systems that had been carved out of the tunnel, and this place becomes the site of one of the major battles of the Okinawa battle for Okinawa. But Yahara talks about that landing. He says, the Americans came ashore, bombing everything on the beach. Of course, there was nobody there. Yeah. He said they were groping like a blind man without a cane, trying to cross a ditch. And the Japanese officers would have sat on this high ground. And he said some of them smoking cigarettes, thinking about what an odd sight it was to watch this massive force come ashore. Backing up now, Shone is eventually brought back in the 1600s. Is eventually brought back here. He finds himself unworthy to be buried at Tama Udun, which is the king's mausoleum tombs down in Shuri.
Just right south of Shuri. I mean, south. It's
right outside of Shuri.
50 meters outside of Shuri Castle, which many people, if you go there on a tour, you've ended up there most likely, or you've seen a lot of pictures of it. So interesting, I didn't know that he felt unworthy to be buried there, and thus this is where he's entombed, his final resting place.
He's entombed here at Urasoi, at what's called the Urasoi Yodore. A yodore would be a mausoleum or a tomb. Okay. And so what was interesting is we went down there today.
As we were walking up, you'll notice that I stopped the camera because there was two ladies that were in Seiza position. Karateka will know that, on a tarp in front of the tomb. And out of respect, I just stopped the camera. We didn't know at the time who they were or why. We kind of knew why they were there, right? The meaning of showing respects in front of the tomb. But to see what they were going through actually reminded me of some of the customs that we do during Obon and Shimi with my family here in Okinawa. So when Perry Sensei and I were talking about it, and we stood there like the typical gaijin wanted to know more, we waited for them to wrap it up, and then we got some really amazing information.
What a conversation. It was just wow. So we approached these ladies once they were done and kind of asked them what they were doing. The one lady that was closest to us, she's what's called a kaminchu. In the Okinawan indigenous religion, priestesses, women, essentially are the spiritual figures in Okinawan religion. This is the indigenous religion. We're not talking about Bukkyo, Buddhism. We're not talking about Shinto. This would be the Okinawan indigenous religion. And the priestesses who administer the religion, who are the religious leaders, are called kaminchu. And the lady we were talking to is a kaminchu. It literally means person of God. Kami, meaning God. Chu, being the Okinawan word for person. So you might hear Uchinanchu, which is an Okinawan person, or a Uminchu, which is a person of the sea, or a Shimanchu, which is a person of the islands, an island person. They had fruit,
Yep.
awamori,
Yep.
rice, and incense, all laid out on this tarp in front of the mausoleum. And the lady, that was the priestess, and the lady that the priestess was with is an ancestor of King Shone, who is the king that we're talking about here, who was ultimately defeated, saw the end of his kingdom, and was taken back to Japan.
I would say that they were, what, 50s? The ladies
probably.
were probably in their 50s. So yeah, she's an ancestor of the king. It was, you could tell she was very shy and almost bashful, right? Kind of the typical, I guess, reaction that you get from.
Well, we were like, "Oh my goodness!"
Yeah,
and
we're
she's like,
almost like holding her up.
She was almost looking at us like,
special.
"What's the big deal?"
Yeah,
right? That was kind of
for
funny.
us. That was, I think, more honorable than for her. But thankfully, because of Perry Sensei's language skills, he was able to get a lot of information, and then tell me more of what's going on. Because if you see the ceremonies around Obon or Shimi, and if you're here on Okinawa at that time, or if you live here, you'll notice that even in the grocery stores, there's certain foods that are prepared for you that we offer to our ancestors: bananas, oranges, apples, mochi. So we found out about the bananas, right? I never knew why.
This was interesting.
But the bananas, they're still in a bunch. They're not separated. So that's to show the unity of a family
And the
growing
health,
strong.
Yep, everyone growing healthy together, right?
Then there was the mochi.
The mochi was interesting.
Mochi, if you're not here on Okinawa, or even if you're here, I love mochi. Mochi is think of pounded rice, and when they're done with it, it almost looks like a marshmallow, and it has kind of the consistency of a marshmallow. Mm-hmm. But you can put things inside the mochi. They'll put sometimes sweet beans. They'll put fruit in there. But they had mochi that was almost flattened out, so it was about the size of a good size American cookie, I guess, flattened out, and that was to represent a mirror.
A mirror, and the mirror allows you to interact with God.
Very interesting.
So for karateka, mochi in Okinawan language is called muchi. Muchimi means sticking hands. So
Yep.
this idea of muchimi, sticking. Muchi in Japanese means a whip. So muchimi can also mean a whipping action. So anyway, a little karate connection there.
Okinawa Karate Podcast. They also had another, I'm going to call it a pastry, the purplish, pinkish pastry
manju.
with beans inside.
Adzuki, that's right. An is adzuki beans crushed up and sweetened bean paste.
Yep, which is very common and pretty delicious here. Put it in different inside mochi or sometimes in zenzai. The Okinawans have the frozen zenzai, just shaved ice with beans in the bottom. But that was, she had described like spreading the beans out, right?
A lot of Japanese customs involve casting beans. It's called mame o maku, mame maki. And so this was the idea that beans are plentiful. There's a lot of them, and so they spread far, and so it's kind of like a request for a prosperous posterity, and having a great posterity, sort of thing.
And then they had awamori,
Awamori,
rice,
right? Kome.
and incense.
That's right. 15 sticks of incense.
So that was
stacked in piles.
interesting, because when during our family gatherings, if we're going to burn incense, I don't know if there's any significance to the number. Like sometimes I've been handed one from my father-in-law or from my wife to put up there for my mother-in-law who's passed, and then the grandparents. But there was two stacks, I guess, of 6.
2 sets of six that were each connected to each other. There were 6 individual, but they were stuck together.
Stuck together, yep.
And there were 2 of those for a total of 12. And then there was one more stick of 3.
Yep.
The 12 sticks represented the 12 gods. And so when you light those, it is to give greetings, go aisatsu, to those gods. And then the 3 is for you.
It's from, greetings from you.
Greetings from me. That's right, from the individual.
So they did something that was interesting too. They poured the awamori on the incense. I didn't get this because normally we would burn the incense and then drink the awamori. But apparently they're not allowed because this is a public site. And also, we would normally leave the food for a period of days. They cannot do that here because it is a park, a public site. So they're going to take them off-site and burn them at another location. Now, did she describe the meaning of the rice?
She did not.
Okay. So we eat the rice, the uncooked grains of rice. We'll do this at New Year's. So my family will do this tradition. We don't have the awamori anymore. The kids are there, so I think it's typically grape juice that my father-in-law will pour or something like that. But the rice, we'll eat 1 or 2 grains of uncooked rice, and that is, the way it's been described to me, is for a plentiful year, a bountiful year, that you have enough to eat for the coming year. So this is something that we do on New Year's Day with my family. And I've been told, I've talked to other families on Okinawa, it's kind of unique maybe to us. My father-in-law's from Ishigaki. Not everybody here in Okinawa does it, but they had rice back there, and I saw that they had sprinkled some of the rice on the incense.
On the stacks of incense.
So they had 6 or something stacks, 5 stacks
five
of incense?
separate sacks of incense in this 15 incense stick configuration, and then they each one sprinkled a little bit of rice on each pile of incense, and then poured just a little awamori or osake on those. Yeah.
So, very interesting. We waited till they were done, talked to them for another 15 minutes or so, got a lot of information.
It was fascinating.
Just perfect timing that we were here. I mean, I've been here 3 or 4 times now and have not seen that. So, remarkable location here at what we generally know as Hacksaw Ridge. So hopefully we gave you a little bit of an insight to that. Trying to think, Iha. We saw Iha's tomb as well.
Tomb.
I think we got some pretty good footage of that as well, I hope. So I hope that worked out. But this is a remarkable location.
Neat place to come. Not just for Hacksaw Ridge. We see a lot of Americans here. They come to see Desmond Doss, and what a great way to remember. And it's for us, it's Memorial Day here, so to remember a lot of Americans who died here, but also to look at the other history that occurred here, and not because it's just a tremendously rich place for history.
We've been here for almost 3 hours or something like that.
Wow.
So from here we're going to head probably a little bit further south.
Yeah.
And talk about some other things in Ryukyu history, as well as I think the U.S. military history and what's been going on the island, and of course probably a thing or two about Okinawa karate.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
We might get to some karate eventually.
We might.
All right.
And I'm ready when you are.
Okay. This is another neat place. So we've now moved from Urasue and Hacksaw Ridge, where the second line of Japanese defenses were. The Urasue Castle was. where of course the Satsuma came through. A lot of history over there at Urasoi, but it all ends up converging right here at Shurijo. If you look right behind me, we are at Shurijo now, and but right here to my left is kind of a neat place for karate folks. This is where the Okinawa Shihan Gakko site is located. So when we talk about Okinawan karate history and the founders of modern traditional karate, what I mean by that are the people who took the todi, or the old Okinawan traditions, modernized it, and then introduced it into the Japanese public school system during pre-war Japan. This is the 1920s and 30s. Much of the founders, the prime movers behind that movement, people like Itosu Anko, Hanashiro Chomo, those teachers would have been here. They were teachers at this school, and these columns represent where the Okinawa Shihan Gakko was. And you can imagine, I think you've probably all seen the photo in front of the Shurijo, the Seiden, of lines of people in front of that big beautiful building that recently burned down, but with, I think it's Hanashiro Chomo Sensei in the front doing, it looks like a pinyan kata of some sort, and they're all lined up doing kata together. Well, I could just envision them, and I don't know if this is the case, but going from this location here, making their way right up the road here, up the walls, and into the main area, and doing a karate demonstration. This is really at the center of it. Shibana Choshin is very close to here. Yabu Kensu's home is very close to here. A lot of the founders of modern Shurite style, of course, this is Shuri. It comes from Shuri area, would have been centered right around here. So if you practice Shotokan, if you practice Shorin-ryu, Matsubayashi-ryu, Kobayashi-ryu, any of those kinds of Shurite lineage systems, then this would be kind of the center, the hotbed of where those traditions would have come up. So this is behind me would be the remains, what remains of, and of course this is rebuilt, of the Enkakuji. Enkakuji is a temple that I think there's an Enkakuji temple in Kamakura, Kyoto, places like that they basically are where the Rinkai sect of Zen Buddhism is practiced. And so beginning in 1492, King Shoshin, who would have sat up there in Ryukyu Castle, which is just right there, he commissioned this temple to be built. It took him about 3 years to build it. He built it to enshrine the spirit of his father. But I think it's interesting about this place is that a lot of times we talk about the Ryukyu kingdom and the Okinawan relationship with China. And that's a fair relationship to make. It's an appropriate relationship to make. We often talk about Kumemura, we talk about trade, and we talk about the tributary system with China, which would have been going on during this time as well. However, I think it's fairly telling that the Ryukyu king, when he decided to build a temple to house the spirit of his father, looked toward Japan for the inspiration or for the source of that spiritual import. And so I think it's telling to at least understand that while yes, there's a lot of Chinese influence that we often emphasize, there's also a lot of Japanese influence during this time and even before the Satsuma invasion on Okinawa, and that relationship did exist. Japan and Okinawa was not just an isolated kingdom down here. It was very much looked toward Japan for a lot of things, had a relationship with China, and But in this case here, very much built on the Kamakura or the Kyoto era style of temples. So in Kakuji. All right. So just to give you a little bit of context outside the screen, we are now at the very base of Shuri Castle. The Kangeimon, if you're familiar with that, is just up the stairs right here. And the Shureimon, which many of you are familiar with, is just up the stairs and down the hill. We're not 50 meters from either of those sites. Tucked down here on the hill, underneath Shuri Castle, and behind me is where the headquarters of General Ushijima, who commanded the Japanese Imperial Army's 32nd Army, was headquartered. So this would have been the entrance number 1 to a tunnel complex that would have housed all of the command and control functions that General Ushijima would need to command the battle from this location. Off to my left, several kilometers, is the Urasue line, or the Maeda Kochi, and then beyond that is Kakazu Ridge, where the first lines of real stiff defense would have been set up. South of that is Futenma Airfield, and then of course Kadena Airfield, and then Yontan Airfield, which is where the landings occurred, some 20 kilometers away. And so General Ushijima would begin, after months and months of preparation of these lines, he would defend the island from this location here. It's closed now. There's discussion with the renovation of Shuri to potentially open this back up, but this is where he would have command and control it. This battle, and Ushijima and his chief of staff, Colonel Cho, their lives would end with one of their closest confidants, assistants, if you will, taking their heads with the sword down at the base of the cliffs in Mabuni, which would happen later on in June. And so that's where we are now. This cave runs directly under the castle. It runs all the way to the other side of the ridge, and then with several small offshoots, tunnels with plans room, communications rooms, rooms for the staff to stay, medical rooms, and things like that. So, of course, all of this destroyed and burned during the battle.
So now we're in Itoman, right? Southern part of the island, and we are at a monument for Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, who was the highest ranking officer killed not only here on Okinawa, but in all of World War II.
That's right.
Interestingly enough, this is the first time I've been here, but when I was stationed here in Okinawa, I was stationed at Fort Buckner, which is still a very small Army base. A postage stamp size that's
not a lot of Army on
carved out of a larger Marine base. Fort Buckner was pretty big after the war. The land mass of Fort Buckner itself was pretty big, which is now mostly encompassed by Camp Foster / Butler, I think, what we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not know this as we're standing here, and I'll pan around. There's monuments for another brigadier general. So 1 star below lieutenant general, right? And then a monument for a colonel.
2 stars below.
2 stars, yes, I'm sorry, 2 stars below. They weren't actually killed on this spot, but directly behind us is the spot that they say Lieutenant General Buckner was killed. And they said he was looking south.
Well, I believe so. I'm guessing here, but my assumption is, one, says the rocky outcropping is on his left. There's a rocky outcropping.
So in the
here.
picture, we see this rocky outcropping over his left shoulder. appears that he's looking in the southern direction, we believe.
And I would assume south, because by this point, Shuri line has fallen. The Japanese have consolidated what remains of their defensive forces back into the Mabuni Peninsula, Itoman, that area. So we're on at the southern end of the island at Mabuni, and the Japanese are now falling back in successive defensive lines all the way back to the coast, where, of course, at that point, they run out of room. Keep in mind that the strategic objective here is not to win this battle. The strategic objective for the Japanese is to bring the Americans to the negotiating table to negotiate something other than an unconditional surrender. An unconditional surrender was very damaging to the Japanese society. It meant the end of the imperial system. It meant the end of a lot of things for Japan. They did not know what unconditional surrender might look like. So, one, you make the war this battle so costly that the Americans do not want to invade the mainland. And in order to avoid invading mainland Japan, the Americans become willing to discuss something short of unconditional surrender. What they didn't know, of course, with this is that there's an atomic bomb that helped solve that problem. From the United States perspective, the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki become a way to impose cost on the Japanese that bring the Japanese to a quicker terms of ending the war. Yeah. But the Japanese here are trying to impose costs on the Americans that dissuade the Americans from making that final push into the mainland.
Interesting history. So, a little bit of the story about General Buckner as well. We have to explain that, we could say that all death can be hopefully avoided at some point, or should have been, right? His death at this particular time should have been.
Seems like it.
Seems like it, because the history tells us that he had his helmet on. It's Kevlar now. I don't know what it was back then. Iron.
Yeah.
Steel pot with his stars on it. And one of the pieces of information that I read was that a Marine, or maybe it was
he
a
was
soldier,
here visiting the 8th Marines. 8th Marine Regiment was fighting in this location at the time.
And somebody said, I think from a neighboring area, very close area, sir, radioed over, or the word got back, we can see your brass, we can see your rank. You need to get down off that hill, that knoll, that ridge, or change your helmet, whatever. And whether he did or not, there's mixed information we read about that. But the Japanese had also spotted that. Lo and behold, there's an officer. They start launching mortars or artillery.
Forward observers. There's a forward observer at somewhere over here that can see him, and they begin launching indirect fire in this direction, and it lands on a rock coral outcropping that's right beside him, and ultimately the shrapnel from that explosion is what ultimately killed him a few minutes after the round exploded by him.
So that was on June 18th. The war itself on Okinawa ended
June 22nd?
22nd.
Mm-hmm.
June 22nd. So from April 1st, where we had filmed in in Yomitan, and Perry Sensei described the U.S. military coming in, right? And then we had talked about this moving south along the ridges, and we had filmed earlier at what is Hacksaw Ridge in Udasoi, and then down at Shuri Castle. Now we're down at the southern part of the island. Everything was moving down, and on June 18th, the commander of the forces here on U.S. forces died. June 22nd, the battle ended.
That's right.
On Okinawa.
And of course, the general's commander on his opponent's side commits suicide shortly after that in a cave just down to our south here, and with his chief of staff, and that effectively ends the Japanese ability to really consolidate, command and control any time further fight.
Interesting. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is June 9th today. We left off a couple days ago, about a week ago, in Itoman. Perry Sensei and I finished up at the General Buckner monument, where General Buckner died in battle. We had talked about the fragments from the rock outcropping had torn into him. He basically died right there, from what we understand. And now we find ourselves at a very special location on Kadena Air Base. I'm going to allow Perry Sensei to give us the history behind this, and then we're going to wrap it up with some other discussions that we both want to talk about. So Perry Sensei will take it away and talk about where we're standing right now and why it's so special.
So this is the Peace Memorial Garden, and what's special about this place is on September 7th, which was 5 days after the formal surrender of the government of Japan on the USS Missouri to U.S. forces. 5 days following that, at this location, the Japanese Imperial forces here surrendered to the Americans. Now, this place is called the Peace Memorial Garden. In 1964, this location was rededicated as a place where the peace that came out of that relationship, that surrender, that very terrible experience that these two countries had come through, that we could memorialize and focus on the peace that has come out of this vice the terrible tragedies, of course, that we've already talked about. But kind of the way this rolls out is, you talked about General Buckner, Itoman, down to what's called the Mabuni Peninsula, where ultimately the battle ends. And up in Tokyo, of course, there is a discussion about how to terminate the war. How do you actually end this thing under conditions that are at least somewhat favorable to the future generations of Japanese? I mean, this is a generational discussion. It's an existential discussion for Japan. Of course, at the time, nobody really anticipated what the atomic bomb would do.
Right.
And so the discussion would be, do you continue to draw out the war and make the war costly enough for the Americans and the Allies to come to the table to seek for more favorable terms of surrender, or do you seek a way to accept the terms of surrender from the Potsdam Declaration, which demanded unconditional surrender? And then on August 6th, of course, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And at the time, the initial reports made it up to Tokyo, and nobody could really get their head around what had happened. The entire city kind of disappeared overnight. The government of Japan continued to struggle with what to do with this new information. Of course, during that time, Russia comes into the war. The Soviet Union comes into the war, and on August 9th, the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and that kind of brought the government of Japan to the terms that we know today. So on August 15th, the emperor goes on the radio and announces the surrender of Japan.
First time that many people had ever even heard him speak.
That's right. It was an interesting story. I mean, just the discussion, the details of how that recording was made, how it was safeguarded, because there were many factions in the government that did not want to see that happen.
Right.
The unconditional surrender was just something that Japan should never have, in their minds, acquiesced to. So it was a monumental moment for Japan. The formal surrender happens a few weeks later on the USS Missouri, and that's where the formal instruments of surrender are signed on April 2nd, and then 5 days later here is where the local commanders here acknowledge that surrender and sign the surrender documents to General Stilwell from the U.S. Army on this location. So it really is, one, it's a place of significant historical significance here, but I think also it's a neat, the concept of it as a peace memorial park.
Right.
It really celebrates the peace that emerges from that,
Right.
And not necessarily the celebrating of victory or
Correct.
anything like that.
Yeah. It is it is a nice area. Unfortunately, for most visitors to Okinawa, you can't visit here unless you get signed on to the military base. I myself have to get signed on. Perry Sensei signed me on just now. I wish it was off base so more people could visit and reflect on it. We have a beautiful Peace Memorial Park in Itoman that many people have visited, and I encourage you to go there when you do come to Okinawa. But this is a significant location as well, and it is, you can see in the background, there's housing. This is the military housing area of Kadena Air Base, but you'll see some photos I'm overlaying here of what it looked like back in 1945. It was the headquarters, I guess, of the 10th Army at that
Right.
time.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of dirt roads coming in here, and this
Yep.
is where the 10th Army
Yep.
would have been, and they would have brought the leaders who were still there. Of course, we know General Ushijima and his chief of staff, General Cho, of course, had committed suicide by that point. So the leadership that was
Yep.
still here would have come to this location.
So as we had mentioned before, June 22nd was the end of fighting on Okinawa. June 23rd on Okinawa is Okinawa's Memorial Day, Irei no Hi. And I was asking Perry Sensei before we were rolling here, what does this mean?
Yeah, it's
Irei-
Comforting the Spirits Day. It's a
Okay.
day of memorializing the spirits.
So it's similar to Memorial
Memorial
Days
Day.
in America, of course, and other countries, but specifically he said he wanted to look at the kanji, right?
I don't think I did though, did I?
It was from Wikipedia. I had to pull it up really quick, so I hope that was correct. But it's Memorial Day. That is only a holiday here in Okinawa, June 23rd. So there will be a moment of silence on that day, and then there will be some remembrance at Peace Prayer Park in Itoman. It is a special day here in Okinawa. But I wanted to recap a little bit too of why we did this, why we wanted to make this video series. You know, we started out in Itoman, talking about
Yomitan.
Yomitan, I'm sorry, talking about the events that unfolded on April 1st, and we ended up in Itoman talking about the events that unfolded on June 22nd, and now here, what unfolded on September 7th, 1945. The reason we did this is because of some conversations that Perry Sensei and I had. You know, I had filmed the Kangeko that he hosted, and then I did the interview series with Perry Sensei, and then we talked about the book that he wrote, An Old Man's Way, about his father, Hanshi Doug Perry. But through all of these conversations, I was pulling information from him about historical events, and we got talking about a lot of people that we train with, a lot of places that we've been, and people we train with now and have met that we can probably say with 100% confidence we would never have met these people had it not been for the events that took place in 1945. And that is not to say great things about World War II, but it is to say great things about what came after and the peace that came after, right? We know that countless karate senseis and masters would have been lost
Right.
during the war, and then even someone like Kyan Chotoku, who died in 1945 due to famine, they say, right, after the war, and all the archives that were lost. But it was, I think, 240 some odd thousand Okinawans had perished, and we know, as karateka, we know that there was a great loss of karateka as well. So that's why we're doing this as part of the Okinawa Karate Podcast, right? And we wanted to just kind of reflect on all the people we've met. And one of our good friends, James Pankovich, who owns the Asato Dojo, formerly owned the Dojo Bar, right? An international hub, if you will, where karateka would come from all over the world. And we've trained with people from, of course, probably every state, Canada, parts of South America, all over Europe, Japan, of course, Vietnam, China, Australia, Africa, all come here to Okinawa. And I just don't think that would have happened had it not been for such tragic events. But trying to look at the good parts that come out of that, that's why we wanted to do this video series, and that's why we were, you know, just through talking about it, said, hey, let's roll the camera as we're going through the jungle and as I'm freaking out about Habu, right, and stuff like that.
Just a little bit.
But just a little
Just a
bit.
little.
Yeah, you didn't see everything that was not on camera.
There's nothing here to see.
They were watching me, I'm sure. But so we hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from Perry Sensei, and it's intrigued me to do a lot more research on my own, and then to pick his brain a lot more. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you
one more time, really, for everything.
Really enjoyed
And
it.
I'm not done picking your brain here, so
this is fun.
we realized that this was a little bit short on the actual karate aspect. I don't know that we took our gis with us one day, but we never even put them on.
Never. That's right.
But we had a lot of fun doing this. We hope you enjoyed watching it. Questions, comments, anything, throw it our way. That's about it from my end. Anything else? Any closing thoughts?
No, this has been a good time. It's made me go back and kind of review and whatnot. But I think in reflecting on it, as you said, the opportunities that came out of the war, as tragic as those things were, I think one, as the Americans came in after the war and realized just what a special place this was. And then to think that this martial art of karate emerged from this place. And there probably wasn't a whole lot of appreciation for that fact at the time.
Not at that time, no.
Right? People like my father in the 60s, or even people before then, who were training at the Agena Dojo or training under, WWII Sensei or those people. And some of those teachers still teaching. I mean, Fusei Kisei still teaches right down the road here,
Yeah.
And so I think the attractiveness of, one, the fact that such a violent art could be practiced by such a peaceful people for the purpose of, avoiding the conflict.
Right.
What a powerful message to a group of people like Marines, sailors, airmen, who train for war every day, who don't want to go because they know that the final outcome is always uncertain, and yet the very act of training hard and training with intent allows us then to avoid the conflict. The resiliency, I think, we respect that resiliency. For this place was leveled. And the people who came through that are just tremendous. There's one story. I want to tell one story, and you can cut it out if you need to.
No.
We bought a violin for my daughter.
Yeah.
Did I tell you this?
You did, but I want to hear it on.
In Kainan, down in Naha. There's like one person on the island who looked online and this gentleman he's in his 80s. He's probably 5'4" if he's an inch, and I just started talking to him. Interesting. How old are you? What are you doing? How'd you get here? All that stuff. He was 13 years old, born in Osaka, but he's Okinawan. Born in Osaka. At 13, his father passed away from sickness during the war. The war ended when he was 13 years old. He gets on a U.S. military ship in Osaka, Nagoya, I think, and floats down and gets off that boat at White Beach, which is the same place where my father landed in Okinawa the first time in 1964.
Wow.
So, of course, he's taken to an encampment here on Okinawa. Naha was completely occupied. Civilians were not allowed in Naha at the time.
Okay.
The occupation had begun in earnest. And so he lived on this for several years, learned a little bit of English, and eventually when Naha opened up, he and his family, 9 people, moved to this little hill in Naha. They set up a tent, shared that tent with another family. He was 16 years old now. And he says, life was tough. We built a well, dug a well. I eventually got a job, he says, at Kadena. Well, Kadena and Naha are not really close even today, and that back then. So it was working on a construction here on the base. A U.S. officer knew of his love for music, and one day just gave him a violin. And he taught himself how to play the violin. He eventually taught himself how to make violins. And on that little piece of dirt, they eventually built a wood house with a little thatched roof, and then turned that into a regular home. And so as we're sitting there in his shop in Naha, and he's telling me this, and I'm just absolutely fascinated. I learned he taught himself how to play music, how to make violins, and that's what he does today. And I asked him, I said, where was this tent you built in Naha? He said, it's right here. The building, that little store we were in is exactly where that, and this was the gankiest, happiest Genki gentleman I've ever met. And yet the real challenges that he had personally experienced through this whole thing, and yet his outlook on life was so positive. You know, that it was really a impactful moment to talk to this gentleman. And so when I think about karate, he wasn't a karateka.
Right.
But the principles that are taught in karate are not just in the dojo, they are in the society here.
Yep.
And I think when we see those relationships, we can appreciate then the art we do practice. Not just because of the techniques and the ability to defend yourself or to understand, but the more important life lessons that come with that.
Right.
So, okay, I
That's
talked way more
Okinawa.
time.
That's Okinawa.
That's right. Okay.
That's Okinawa. Those are the places you need to find and really appreciate it. The dojo is great. Sometimes you got to step out, right?
That's right.
Well, we're going to end it here. We really do hope you enjoyed this series because we enjoyed making it. And I'll close by saying thank you very much for tuning into the Okinawa Karate Podcast. As always, I am Josh Simmers, coming to you from the birthplace of karate, Okinawa, Japan.